So anyway, hello everybody. Welcome back. Symphony, Tamara, Matthew, Carlo, Volker, Sinisa, Shia, Rich. Awesome guys. Thanks for coming back. Davey boy. All right. Awesome. So let me put the slides on screen.
Get them slides on the screen.
I think you have to make me presenter, Andy.
Yeah, there you go. You are now the presenter.
Happy Musicians Day.
It is. That's like Wednesday is our weekly holiday. So you don't want to do a screen share. The slides are directly in Demio.
It worked this time.
Yeah, it worked.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah, last week we had an issue where we couldn't get the slides uploaded, but now we got it. Boom. There we go.
Yeah. All right. Things coming together. All right. So I always start with this just simple 7 phases diagram. I'm finding myself tending to use the words operation more than phases now. A phase is really like a part of a cycle. And although this is a cycle and we do go through it, I think in the alchemical literature, the appropriate name is like operation, I think, because these are actually like not so much just like a part of a wave, but it's like an actual operation in which you as a conscious human being are performing something that only a conscious human being can do, kind of thing. So I'm tending towards operation now, so we're up on the 6th operation of distillation, and in audio alchemy we relate that to the mixing phase or the mixdown phase. So the plan for today is we're gonna go a bit deeper into the alchemy stuff, because I am gonna go into Ableton and show you some mixing and how I'm gonna approach the mix for this track. But I'm obviously not gonna mix it down in a webinar on these earphones. So we wanted to go a bit deeper into some of the alchemy stuff today, and then I'll come to Ableton and look at the mixing stuff a bit later. So all right. So let's crack on then. Quotes of the day. So here's one that really resonated with me. The golden rule of true spirit science: for every 1 step that you take in the pursuit of higher knowledge, take 3 steps in the perfection of your own character. That's Rudolf Steiner. I can relate to this because I've obviously put myself in this position of teaching alchemy and researching this pursuit of higher knowledge, as it were, and it does indeed cause you to reflect on yourself and your own character. It really challenges you to deal with your own bullshit, shall we say? And it's I just have to put that out there because it has been challenging me, and I'll be honest with you, as we're approaching now the end stages of this webinar, I'm feeling the pressure now because I'm gonna have to finish this song, and I'll admit to you, I mean, I've finished many songs over the years, but I still have trouble finishing. And the last few years, I've gotten a lot of music to this stage. I'd say I've probably got maybe 13, 14, 15 tracks, including a 10-track album, which are all at this distillation stage. It's kind of actually finishing and coagulating all of it is kind of overwhelming, and it has been, this last year with all the touring and my family life and everything. Just like it's a lot of work, and finishing a track is a mysterious process. It's a difficult process, the letting go, and the step into vulnerability, and just that kind of commitment. And it's kind of a door that we each have to walk through individually, and that is, once it's out there, that's it. It's part of you and your it's part of how people see you. It's part of the effect that you're going to have on the world, like everything that you put into it, so yeah, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm here. I'm at this point with a lot of projects right now, distilling and coagulating, finishing. So yeah, so here I am, and yeah, over to you, Andy.
Yeah, I just want to say, just to add on to that, it's interesting, like the idea of when you release a tune, it's your name's on it. It's a part of you, and that people are going to experience it, and it's going to have an effect on them. And so, yeah, like releasing that into the world can be a tough thing. And the quote that you chose about for every one step in the pursuit of higher knowledge, take 3 steps in the perfection of your own character. And it's like the music is one thing, but the you aspect of it, like who we bring to the world through who we are, right? Like that's the greatest art. And that's the the great work is really the perfection of the self. So
yeah,
so it's interesting to like think about what am I producing into the world, but even another question is like who am I being in the world, what am I in the world, right?
yeah.
It's very yeah. So okay, so my quote is this is from a book. I read this book a while ago. It's like I think it's not a children's book, but it's definitely like anybody can read it type of book called Alchemist. I'm sure a lot of you have probably read it. And so okay, so this is why alchemy exists, the boy said, so that everyone will search for his treasure, find it, and then want to be better than he was in his former life. Lead will play its role until the world has no further need for lead, and then lead will have to turn itself into gold. That's what alchemists do. They show that when we strive to become better than we are, everything around us becomes better too. So
yeah, good one. Yeah, I read The Alchemist many years ago, actually, and I can relate to that in a lot of ways, actually, like having moved myself, moved my home several times in my life in search of, a better life, or, sunnier, life or whatever. And there is that kind of happening of when you get there, when you like find your treasure. And so suddenly, like, yeah, it's like it wears, the newness and the novelty, like it wears off pretty quickly, and you find you're just like back, internally you're just back where you started, because you can't, change your outside world to change your inside world. You have to do the inner work, and so yeah, so when you change your outside world like that, it kind of reflects back. It makes you look back into yourself and aspire to be better, having found that treasure, as it were.
yeah, it's interesting too. This thing, it says lead will play a role. Lead will play its role until the world has no further need for lead, and then lead will have turned itself into gold. And it's we could look at the lead as being anything that's undesirable, right?
Yeah.
Suffering, war, all the stuff that we like to bitch and moan about all the time. That's all the the woes of the world. To a certain, in the eyes of an alchemist, that it plays a role. It has a purpose. That's not just like,
yeah, it's not just there because life
it's
sucks.
not just there, yeah, because life sucks. Like it actually has a purpose. And I was reading in one of these. Actually, it's this book right here, the secret Destiny of America. Really good book. Highly recommend you check it out. It talks about how like the government that we now have, that's in control, like this super power hungry kind of like, what's the word, like when it like keeps you down? What's that word? Not compression, maybe like compression, but
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like when it holds you back, keeps you down. Repression. Yeah. It's this idea that like the reason it's like that is it's a necessary evil to sort of save us from ourselves, right? Because without that kind of like the older brother like holding us down, like we would just be our animal selves and raise havoc. But when we transcend that animal nature and actually become good people, like actual good humans that are in tune with our hearts and each other, then we won't need to have that repression.
Mm-hmm.
So the repression is the lead, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's serving its purpose. It's kind of fortifying us to get to where we need to go.
Yeah.
And when we don't need it anymore, we won't need to deal with it. But
Well,
we
this
do
is
need
it.
it right now.
Yeah, it's the notion of the watermelon seed in between your fingers. You know, you squeeze it and eventually it just goes boing.
Yeah.
It's like the squeeze is there, you know, and yeah, as we liberate ourselves, as we do the great work, then that oppressive or repressive
Yeah.
or oppressive force becomes less of an influence on our lives, and yeah, but then we're then left with having to govern ourselves and be our own boss, which is
Yeah, yeah.
a whole other challenge.
It's well, that's the whole thing is that like we, as a society, as a humanity, we haven't deserved the right to be our own boss. Like if we were to be our own boss, it would just devolve into barbarianism, most likely,
Yeah.
right? That's why we're all scared of anarchism and that idea of like, well, if we don't have government, then what? We would all just go crazy. And it's like, yeah, we probably would. But
Yeah, there's got to be a center and a center point for us to revolve around, I guess.
but yeah, it's interesting. The Philosopher's Stone, which is the next phase that we're going to talk about next week, which is coagulation, is when the Philosopher's Stone is basically fortified and materialized. A lot of times it's depicted as a diamond, and it's interesting that like a diamond is basically created by through like pressure, and it's carbon. Basically, it's like carbon, just which is basically coal, or you can think of it as lead, is like the right pressure, and then it like fortifies and becomes a diamond. So
yeah,
kind of interesting.
Time and pressure.
Yeah,
Can achieve anything. Yeah.
And then with alchemy, they say, I can't remember the exact quote, but it says like it talks about with Steve, do you remember what this one is? It was like tending to it with like with like a constant heat and with great attention, over a long period of time. I'm totally butchering the. I can't remember what the quote is.
I think it's from the Emerald Tablet.
Yeah. With great ingenuity.
Yeah, that's the one. Subtlety and great ingenuity.
Yep. So, anyways, I think I'm done with that thought. Let's move on.
Yeah, so we picked out a bunch of alchemical art today to kind of talk through because yeah, these are like this is like ancient visionary art, basically. The visionary art we enjoy now at festivals and the internet and all that kind of stuff. Like there were people like 600-700 years ago who were doing paintings just like that, and encoding lots of alchemical knowledge in there. So
Yeah, so it's interesting too. Like I'm finding that like a lot of this old art, even though it's the technique isn't like as fancy as you see at the festivals these days, I find that a lot of this old art feels even more symbolic and more packed with meaning than a lot of the so-called visionary art that we see today. But I reckon that'll start to change as people dive deeper into and kind of revive all this alchemical way of doing things. But anyways, so this specific piece, we don't want to dig too deep into it at this point. We'll actually revisit it later, but we just want to just kind of show it and just like let that sink in and just just take note of like what you see in it and what you notice. And this is one of those pieces where you start to notice more and more and more as you start to understand more about alchemy. And that's just the nature of alchemical art. It's everything is symbolic. Nothing is meant to be taken at face value. And the same can be said about religion in general. There's what's called there's a difference between what's called exoteric and esoteric, right? So exoteric is like what things seem to be on the outside, and esoteric is what they really are on the inside. And so a piece of art like this is a great example of what you're looking at, what you see, what it seems to be is the exoteric aspect, but what it really is and what it symbolizes is the esoteric part. So just to start, we can focus on the exoteric aspect of it. What we're looking at here is a pelican. The pelican is in its nest, and it's got 7 baby pelicans, and it's feeding the baby pelicans itself. That's the little red thing. That's actually giving it. It's taking its own flesh and giving it to its baby pelicans. There's a cross with a rose on it, and what are those things called? Is it like a compass? Yeah, it's a compass. It's a compass with a crown on it.
A crown, yeah.
And it says the letters INRA. So it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I know that when I first saw this, I definitely felt like I was just kind of like, I just intuitively knew that there was something significant about this.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know what.
Mm-hmm.
But so we'll get back to this.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, let's move on a bit. So I wanted to just put this image. So Douglas William Hawke, who wrote the book called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Alchemy, which is one of the best primer starter books to get into all this. But anyway, I saw something from him recently, and he brought up this image and said it was his least favorite alchemical painting. Now it basically just shows a guy there, puffing away at the fire in a dank, underground laboratory. And it's a bit of a mess. And the reason that what this is actually showing is this is showing what was called the puffers. Yeah, and we talked about this way back in the beginning, like the puffers. So what were the puffers? Like they were the kind of phony alchemists. They were the alchemists who were just puffing fire, trying to get the heat going to make lead into gold, and just chasing material wealth. And in alchemical art, there's always 2 dimensions. Okay, so there's the upward, the y-axis, which always has the above and the below. Yeah, as above, so below. And then the y-axis, which usually represents the duality, like masculine and feminine or whatever. But the
material plane as well.
Yeah, the material plane. In this painting, though, there's really no vertical axis. You see, it's just this kind of weird, asymmetric ceiling. It's kind of dark. It's underground. There's no sense of anything mighty above us. He's working away at the fire. In the background, his wife and children are just sitting in the dark, kind of looking a bit neglected or whatever. And this is symbolic of the puffer, because basically with the lack of the above means that he has no connection to the divine. He's not doing his work for any divine reason. He's just trying to get rich. He's just chasing material dreams, and he's neglecting his family and neglecting the harmony of his space. And just generally, neglecting everything in pursuit of gold. And
he's trying to create gold for the sake of creating gold, because he wants gold, right?
Yeah. And this, I think this serves as a warning to anybody working in the creative arts. We all hear about this notion of selling out or whatever, and this is what we're talking. This is the puffer mentality, when it's just when you're just chasing the gold with no higher reason or purpose for what you're doing, other than that, just everything starts to fall apart around you. It's I think that this serves as a warning, and this can happen in the music industry. As an artist, you haven't got much money, and you need to go and do things to make money that are not what you want to be doing. They're not the path that you want to be on, but you're making sacrifices, and these sacrifices can lead you down this just this kind of puffer path. So I mean, I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's quite a powerful image.
And interestingly enough, even if he did figure out how to create gold, he would be inherently dissatisfied with the result.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to actually get him what he's looking for.
Yeah.
So, in the same way that, you might make it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you find yourself having made it, it's just not good enough. I mean, there's a documentary, Steve Aoki documentary that I watched recently. And it's his whole story about the dude plays over 300 gigs a year, has absolutely reached the pinnacle of what you can do as a DJ, and he's still just it's just not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, I just last night I watched on Netflix. It's a new documentary called Jim and Andy.
Mm-hmm.
It's about Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman. Seriously, brilliant documentary. You got to watch it. But he talks about too that at one point in his career, he was like one of the most famous people ever, like ever on the planet, and was like the guy that was hilarious and carefree in character. And then like when he was in that pinnacle, like he was just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like we all like it's like the dream and the fantasy of the gold or the fame or whatever. um the dream of it, the fantasy of it, is more pleasant than the reality of it if it's not actually attuned to the divine or to whatever that vertical
Vertical axis.
axis.
Yeah, yeah. And so just to show you this next one here now. Now this was actually given to me after one of the retreats. You can see I have it up on my wall there. By an alchemist, a real alchemist who gifted me and Andy these posters. They're about it's a print of a painting which is about 600 years. No, 400 years old. Yeah, 1600s. That's right. Yeah, early 1600s. And this one has very clearly has this above and below. As you can see, there's this a strong kind of line going right through, well, not the middle, but kind of a bit higher up there. And the above there looking very heavenly, of course, and the below looking very earthly. And then all this alchemy stuff in the middle. But there's a huge amount in here. I could do a whole seminar on this. I just want to draw you to the general structure of it. So the above and the below. And then on the left side here, we see the masculine or the king. He's holding the sun, and then there's the feminine. They are holding the moon or being given the moon by this kind of nature spirit thing. The masculine being given the sun by this kind of tamed lion. You can see the lion's got a collar on, and its mane is under the collar, and the tail is coming through between its legs, indicating it's just submitting and handing the power of the sun to the man. There's like a phoenix there, which has the fire and the air elements under its wings, and an eagle or aquila, sorry, which I think is the same thing, is it? With the water and earth elements. And anyway, in the middle is a man. He is the alchemist, and he's standing with two sort of axes, and he's wearing a robe in which half of the robe is dark and half of the robe is light, indicating his balance. He's right in the middle. You'll see that both the masculine and the feminine here are chained to, they're handcuffed to the clouds. Okay, so the clouds represent our unknowing and our ignorance. And then behind the clouds, of course, there's all the stars. There's like 7 large stars there, which represent the luminaries. These birds and dragons, which represent the different stages of alchemy, and then all this other stuff in the middle there, which I can't really go into now. And then up the top, there's 2 suns, which I've had this for over a year, and I don't know why, but I never noticed there was 2 suns, and there's a significant reason for that, why there's a sun behind the sun as well. But so I just wanted to give this as an example of a really deep piece of alchemical art that kind of has that above and below symmetry and the duality, and just tons and tons of alchemical knowledge buried into it.
Yeah, you can't really tell because it's kind of small here, but that in that central kind of golden sun looking thing in the middle, there's all these concentric circles of different symbols and correspondences, and it goes there's a lot of info packed in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trees have all of the symbols of the planets, and some of the other symbols like the circles with lines through them. There's like salt. There are different types of salt and sulfur, and it's kind of like the key substances in alchemy, like salt, sulfur, and mercury, and all the planets and so on. I'm not sure what the lion at the front is that the alchemist is standing on, this kind of like lion that has like one face but two bodies and has like water pouring out of it. I haven't quite figured out what that means yet. But yeah, full of mysteries is this one.
Yep.
And the tetragrammaton at the top, yeah. So that is it Yod He Vov He, the name of God in Hebrew, with a tetragrammaton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those little faces are like the archetypes. Yeah. All right. So anyway, we'll crack on. So we want to talk about distillation today, and yeah, as all this is actually relevant to distillation, as hopefully will become apparent to you as we move on. So I just wanted to read this quote. This is from the Douglas William Hawke book.
It's Dennis.
Oh, Dennis. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. Easy to mix up.
Distillation is a key process on all levels of alchemy. It involves releasing volatile essences from their prison in matter and condensing them in a purified form. In practical terms, this involves heating a substance until it boils and then condensing the vapors into a purified liquid. Distillation is described in the Emerald Tablet as it rises from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, thereby combining within itself the powers of both the above and the below. And this is kind of what we see in these kind of distillation chambers. Andy will talk a bit more about those. But it's this process where it kind of comes up and then it's collected in sort of steam form, and then it sort of separates the lower aspects from the higher aspects. And then this is done again and again and again to increase purification of substance.
Some old alchemy art that is depicting the process of distillation. I've never seen a distillation set up quite like this. I think this one's just a little bit more symbolical. Mm-hmm. But as you can see down at the bottom, it's interestingly enough, there's this the man on the left, the woman on the right. So again, when we're looking at alchemical art, you can look at the exoteric value of it, which is what you see, or you could try to flesh out the esoteric symbolic aspect, which is really the true meaning within it. And so anyways, he's got, or both of them, you see there's the fire and it's heating up this bottom bit, and then what happens is the vapors go up through the chambers, and they look like they're spiraling in and out. And then what they do is they get cooled as it goes back down into these upper bits. And so what's collecting in those upper which I forget what they're called, flasks, collection flasks, is like is the essential oil. It's the essence, right? And so it's interesting how it's going through this process, and what's it called, the Caduceus, or what is that, like this
Caduceus.
Caduceus. Caduceus. So, yeah, like I think that there's some Caduceus action going on here. There's the male and female, the two sides that are weaving in through each other like that.
Yeah.
So that's hidden. That's in there.
And they are like, yeah, I didn't even know about this when I got the tattoo, but this keeps coming up. Yeah, this spiral of going up. Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot more hidden in here that I'm not seeing, but yeah. So you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah. So psychologically, distillation is the agitation and sublimation of psychic forces necessary to ensure that no impurities from the inflated ego or deeply submerged id are incorporated into the next and final stage. Personal distillation consists of a variety of introspective techniques that raise the content of the psyche to the highest level possible, free from sentimentality and emotions, cut off from one's personal identity. So yeah, okay. So yeah, some people are talking about the spine and the Kundalini. They're starting to see where this is going. Yeah. There's definitely links in here to the raising of energy up the spinal column. We'll come to that in a later slide, actually.
Yep.
But yeah, so you might be thinking, well, how is this relating to mixing at this stage? And I've been thinking about that a lot as well. And I actually quite like the way it's described here, in terms of agitating and sublimating. So, it's like we're rising things up and then letting them come back down, rising them up and come back down. There's a move in qigong that does that as well. Hey, it's like the torus. And so in the sense of mixing music, I see this process like it's like we take the levels and the tonality and the different qualities of the different sounds, and we agitate them and sublimate them, bring them back and forward, with the faders and things, to find that kind of like sweetest, the sweetest kind of balance between them. So anyway, we'll come on to that more later. There's more alchemy to be discussed.
Yeah, I just want to mention too.
Are you on this?
Can you go back?
Yeah,
go back just so I can kind of keep this in my headspace. Just on the topic of psychological distillation and just this idea of there's like psychological alchemy. So we're talking about physical alchemy, which is kind of more chemistry, like laboratory stuff, and then there's the psychological alchemy. And as we talked about in the very beginning, the real alchemy, the real work is on the self. So one could say that the true alchemy, the real work, is the psychological aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've mentioned before that these laboratory operations, like doing a distillation in a lab, right? By doing that process, it's helping the alchemist to actually do the psychological distillation. There's a relationship there, and one could even say that the physical distillation, like where you actually have, like say you're distilling essential oils or something, right? Like that's the exoteric, that's the exoteric aspect of the alchemy. Mm-hmm. Whereas like understanding what is hidden in that, right? Like, and this is where it's interesting, is that like nature has hidden meaning, like in just the way the chemistry is, like distillation, that's nature, right? Mm-hmm. And hidden within that is these deeper aspects and deeper things that we can learn. And that's what I'm starting to understand, that the alchemists understood, is that the universe, the divine, whatever, is speaking through the manifestation, and the alchemy and the chemistry is a way of kind of like hacking into that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very interesting. It's like it's using that mechanism, that distillation, as a way to sort of like hack the meaning of what that is. Mm-hmm. And the same thing can be applied, to the music, and that's what we're doing here. So we're kind of using our music process, our music production processes, as a way to sort of hack our spiritual development.
Wow, amen, bro. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it is like a kind of hacking, because you have this direct feedback between like the settings, what you're doing, and then what's coming through the sound, and then the frequencies are then going into you, and then they're then moving around inside of you. There's this whole direct feedback loop, and it's almost like we're interfacing with our internal state. And then adjusting controls to take our internal state on this journey. And I've often thought that when I'm looking at an EQ or an analyzer, and I'm looking at all the peaks like jumping up and down, I'm like, we think of it as like we're looking at what's coming out of the speakers, but we're also looking at what's happening inside of us while we listen to it. Yep. And that's.
Casey is asking, so the music is the exoteric in this case? ? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. The music, that's when we put a piece of music out into the world, that is our. Like that. Like if we just think about that art, the art that we've been showing you guys, like that's, if you were just thinking, instead of making an art piece, we're making a piece of music. Well, like how the music sounds is the exoteric aspect, but what we put into the music, that's the esoteric aspect. And there's ways of encoding the music as such that people, the right ears, the right minds, the right hearts, can sort of like extract that wisdom that we can put into it.
Mhm.
In the same way that, you know, to deaf eye, you know, to blind eyes, they're not going to get shit out of any of this art. It's just going to be like some strange art that, you know, looks weird. And there's like a
Mhm.
pelican feeding itself to its baby. That's strange. What's
Yeah.
up with that?
Yeah.
Right. Same way, like psychedelic music sounds weird to most people.
Mhm.
And, you know, a lot of it is just squelchy, farty noises. And there's not really actually, um, like deep symbolic stuff
Mm.
imbued into it. But I think that that's, you know, that's where we're sort of headed, and what we're really interested in. Interested in is how to sort of infuse more wisdom into the art that we create. You know, it's kind of like the art then becomes a sort of souvenir or like an offering to the world to sort of be able to kind of extract off, you know, the process that we went through in making it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the really the art is like what we are going through as humans and evolving, and then the music is just sort of this like this chemical byproduct of that process.
Yeah, that's it. When you think of it from the point of view of someone who just, is just stumbling across your track, and they're just, just having their day on the internet, and they just click it, and, they're just like, yeah, it's this, it's that, just form. It's like, there's all this like esoteric stuff that's you've done and gone into it, this whole aspect of your life, a period of your life where you've devoted yourself to crafting this gift to give to others. And then yeah, but for someone else, like, they can just look at it on the surface level, it's just a bunch of sounds, it's just, it's just, breaks or techno or whatever, it's just another breaks track. Yeah, it's just, there's interesting, there's those two sides to it. But then you're right, the people who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, they notice the work that's gone into it. And really, I think that's one of the best compliments any artist wants to receive. It's when somebody points out a highly crafted detail or aspect of their art and says, I really appreciate, how much work must have gone into that. It's like, that's kind
Yeah.
of what, artists love to hear, because we do, you all do, we spend ages just like crafting these like little details and subtle nuances, only to have a bunch of drunk people, tell us that it sounds like, Pendulum or something. I did have someone tell me my music sounded like Pendulum once, like, which I never really thought it did, but there you go. So yeah, that's just the thing of being an artist, I guess. All right, let's move on. So yeah, Andy's been getting into a bit of lab alchemy, and yeah,
Yes,
all this
yeah,
business.
that's something I'm stoked to be getting into. Me and my fiance Mara actually we bought a like a whole distillation kit like years ago before we moved to Hawaii, and it has literally just sat in the box that it was shipped in. And like this was before I even knew anything about alchemy, and we had like we bought this thing just because we were interested in making essential oils. So we bought this like essential oil distillation kit, a tincture, the vacuum tincture kit, all this stuff. And just like a few weeks ago, we were like, oh my god, it's time. Let's open it. So we like cracked it open, and we just like have all this glass laboratory gear. So anyways, we're stoked to get into it, and we'll share what we learn with you guys as we go. But anyways, what this is just a common distillation apparatus. So as you can see, like on this one on the top left, it's basically got there's at the very bottom is a flame, okay, and then in the next glass bit there's a liquid with some sort of, generally you'd put like some sort of plant material in it, and then what happens is the liquid of the plant material in it heats up, and then it starts to evaporate and turn to steam, and then it goes through this through that top thing, and then it starts to basically the downspout part is what's it called? Going blank here. Condensation. It's a condenser. Yeah.
Mm.
So basically, what happens is like the steam kind of like it stays up at that top, right? And it's just sitting there, and then the like the essence starts to condense out of the steam, and then that's what's collected into that smaller little flask, right? So it's basically the gross matter. And when I say gross, just like, I'm not saying like icky or anything, but you know what I mean. The gross matter is in the main vessel, and then the refined essence that's extracted from the gross matter is collected into the smaller one. And so distillation is this process of distilling essential oils is like that's the most obvious thing that you would want to distill. And you're basically taking a plant, which is a lot of something, and then you're extracting the essential oil, which is the sort of refined essence of that plant, and that corresponds to what's called philosophical sulfur. So there's the sulfur, salt, and the mercury. So the salt, is the body of the plant. It's the main stuff of the plant, and then the sulfur of the plant is the oil, and then the mercury of the plant is the alcohol, which is what we do through distillation, or not distillation, but fermentation. So anyways, interestingly enough, this sort of looks like it kind of has a bird thing going on, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And then you down here at the bottom on the left, this shows there's the bird next to the thing. And then there's this other one here, which is interesting, where it's got, the male and the female, and they're like intertwined. And then it shows the two distillation apparatuses that are like feeding into each other, right? And that shows the sort of cyclic nature. And in alchemy, there's these concepts called like the lesser circulation and like the greater circulation. And the greater circulation is one of those processes that leads towards the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. So again, it's interesting that like there's the exoteric face value aspect that we're like literally talking about distilling these substances, but then behind it, these are just this, like the chemistry itself is just symbolic to something that's actually deeper, but they do go hand in hand. So yeah, I think that's all I got to say about this specific piece.
Alrighty, cool. So yeah, so just bringing in the table of correspondences with distillation. So in alchemy, it's associated with the moon and the element of water. So again, we're coming back round. We're coming back round now. We've been through the four elements, remember, and then we went back to fire. But the higher fire, as it were, is sulfur. And in the same way, the higher expression of water is mercury, the liquid metal, quicksilver, as it's called. And this corresponds with the distillation as well. So, and in terms of the chakras and things, it corresponds with the third eye. The processes we're talking about here is kind of like, I like this word potentizing. There's some great words here that I just find that, or if you're kind of like potentizing, it's like just making whatever it was that came out of the fermentation, just making it more potent. Exaltation. Yeah, so yeah, again, we're taking these subtle spiritual essences, and they're spiritual. They're called spirits. Yeah, when things are distilled, they're called spirits, because it's like you've taken the spirit of the original plant material and brought it and made it its own thing. So you're kind of exalting it as well. Not potentiating. I guess, or.
I think they both could work. They both work.
Yeah, that would work as well. Potentizing, yeah. And this one, cohabation, I completely forgot what that means. Do you remember what that means? It's such a bizarre word. Cohabation.
I seem to remember having to do I think it's like a double boiler. No, it's a process of repeated distillation of the same matter. Oh, so it's basically like the drawing where it was like feeding back into itself. That's cohabation, where it's just going round and around.
Yeah, and multiplication as well, in the sense that you were, I guess, multiplying the potency and the Yeah, this is where Rich says we're musicians. We're allowed to invent words. Absolutely, we are allowed to invent the words,
Well,
and we are allowed to make connections as well. This is something that we have to understand, is that we can be the one, we can be the first one to make a connection between two things that someone hasn't made a connection between before. Because we are part of the the connections
yeah,
that
yeah.
are out there. So like, yeah, so if we can connect it, then it becomes a connection that's valid.
Well,
And yeah, sorry, go on.
one could say that creativity is actually the act of making connections between seemingly different,
Mhm.
unrelated things. I mean, uh, what's that idea of like everything is a remix? Like you're not actually ever truly creative. You're just taking your experience and what you know,
Yeah.
and then combining those things into things that are apparently new, but really it's just
Mhm.
combination of things that you already know.
Yeah, yeah. There is but
Um,
one substance. Yeah, this is what the alchemy teaches. There's,
yeah.
there's only one substance. They call it mind, and everything is just a vibration of that. Different vibrations, different motion, different states of motion.
I want to say too, just on Rich was saying like it's okay we're musicians, we're allowed to invent words. So the alchemists, like a lot of these words and processes of chemistry, of modern chemistry, these are all invented by these alchemists back in the day that
Mhm.
were just like figuring this stuff out
Yeah,
with what, little, I mean, think about it, like I think about how advanced it kind of boggles my mind, like what they were able to do, like in these little, like, you know uh just like dungeon laboratories, you know what I mean? Like they didn't have electricity, they didn't have anything, and they were like doing stuff that like we still have a hard time doing today. And a lot of these words like cohobation, exaltation, these are probably just invented by these guys. A lot of these things were. So I know Paracelsus invented lots and lots of words,
Mhm.
like spagyric, which is an alchemical elixir.
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah, you invent concepts, invent words. That's
yeah.
you have full permission.
Yeah. Cool. So some of the influences you're bringing to the process of distillation, of course, is purification, enrichment, refinement, and perfection. That's kind of what we're looking for. It's like making whiskey. Like a good whiskey or something. It's just like getting that like potent blend. In the psychology, talk about raising chi, and I've put divine moments of truth, which yeah, some of you might get that reference there. The reason I put that is, of course, as you can see, distillation corresponds with the third eye, and this is believed to be like the focal point of distillation within the body. And yeah, believe it or not, it corresponds with two different secretions, bodily secretions, being raised up the spine and combined. So there's like basically a point where two veins, I think it's in the neck, I forget what it's called, but where two veins come to one going up, shaped like a cross. And this process of raising the chi or the kundalini, yeah, it has various other names, but this is being alluded to in a lot of this art. Chrism, there we go. Thank you,
Yeah,
Volker. The chrism, the Christos, it was called, I think in Greek, that's oil. Is it Christos?
the oil,
So there's
which
this oils that combine here and then basically illuminate the pineal gland, which is, uh, you know, quite an amazing experience if you've ever had your pineal gland illuminated before. That's what a kind of a divine moment of truth, as you might say. So, yeah, so this all kind of ties in with that. This aspect of objectivity, seeing things as they are, instead of through the illusions that we usually see the world through. And purification of spirit. Okay, so we talked about spirit being the product of distillation ultimately. So um, yeah, and then in the audio spectrum, and I just want to make a point about the audio thing as well. I talked last week about the cleaning, and how when we look through history, we look at the state, we're all doing so much cleaning all the time. There's always this big mess, there's problems in the earth, the trash and everything. And this, when we look at the evolution of audio, as well, it's been a process of just getting cleaner and cleaner audio. This is what we're like driving towards, like cleaner sound, and this is really what the mix down process is like, the final cleaning stage. It's like the final refinement. We're blending the elements together, balancing them, refining them, and talking of making up words. I made this one up this morning, but it turns out to be a real word: nuancing. So yeah, I really like that, nuancing. Just taking the nuances and the subtle parts of what you've created and giving them the fullest expression possible. Because people often, they'll put a lot of details into their songs, but they just get lost in the mix because they haven't given enough, they haven't exalted that detail in a way that people can notice it. It just goes by like, and people don't notice it. So I see this process, this distillation and this mixing, this final piece of work before the coagulation. Yeah, I see it as being a kind of nuancing and refining of what you've got. So yeah, Andy, you dropped this one in. It's quite a
So this
busy.
is just it's pretty busy. There's a lot going on in here. And what this is basically it's just a distillation process where there's a bunch of people distilling stuff. And I just wanted to kind of point out that there's this central vessel with a fire under it, and then there's these little like smaller vessels, collection vessels, kind of spurring off the side of it. Yeah. So that's pretty. I just wanted to point that out, and just so you can like kind of take that in for a second, and it'll make sense in a moment why I'm pointing that out.
All right.
So
move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So here we are again, back to this thing, this weird picture of the bird feeding itself to its children, birds. So knowing, what you know now and kind of what we talked about, I'm just curious, like, do you see anything differently in this piece of art than you did when you first saw it at the beginning of this webinar?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this just before the webinar, and I didn't really, at the time, I didn't really understand the pelican thing there, but I said it's got something to do with distillation, and of course, like I then looked it up, and it turns out that these distillation apparatus are actually called pelicans. Right, and there's a myth that pelicans are able to feed their young from their own blood. I believe. But
you want to go to the next slide.
The next slide.
Ta-da! So like this piece of art, which was it's probably 500 or 600 years old. When all this stuff was invented. Now this piece of art is Rosicrucian, which is basically it's sort of like Freemasonry. I guess you could also say that it has like some like mystic like Christian undertones. I mean, obviously there's a cross there. But everything in this piece of art is there on purpose. Everything. So as you can, if you look at it from a distillation perspective, what you've got here is that the pelican is the main vessel, and then it's feeding itself to its offspring. So these are these smaller vessels that are receiving the oil, right? And the oil is the Christos, right? Which has to do with the pineal gland, and the Christos, which is the Christ, right? And it like you're kind of seeing what's going on here. And then there's the, you look at the cross, there's the rose plant that's spiraling up the cross. And then it's blooming in the middle there, which is like, you could basically look at the rose as the pineal gland, or it's like a Western lotus, basically. Another thing that's interesting is the compass is very like Masonic,
Hmm.
right? So there's a Freemasonry thing going on now. Now Freemasonry is something that we've been realizing and learning that we had no freaking idea what that is. And a lot of people are like, oh, the Illuminati, blah, blah, Freemasons are the ones that run the world, and they're these bad people, and secret societies are bad. And it's just, yeah, it's like a lot of interesting stuff, and it's just not what we thought it was. But one definition of what a Freemason is, I think Steve, you were the one that shared this with
Hmm.
me, is that it's basically anybody that puts hidden meaning in their work.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's an interesting thing, is that there are these official sort of, you can go and become initiated as a Freemason at a Freemasonry lodge or whatever, but like as we're starting to see that it's actually something that they're a self-initiated thing, and just because you're
Yeah.
in a Masonic lodge doesn't actually mean that you are initiated into the
Yeah,
mysteries, so to
you
speak.
don't have to be a member of any special club. I mean, it's in the attitude, it's in your attitude and your actions, and why you're doing what you're doing and what you're putting into it. That's what, yeah, I kind of come to realize. And yeah, if you're putting, because there's knowledge out there that we can't, we just can't talk about. It's, well, we can, but it just takes, it's too much. It's like, but it can be condensed symbolically in art, and in structures, buildings. I mean, just look at any church or whatever in the UK, like just how many, like how much symbolism is like built into it, and the ratios and everything. It's like, that's really the essence of Freemasonry
Yeah.
is. And in some ways, when we make music, when you're making music, because if everything in the music's all like harmonically lined up, you can see you're building kind of like it's like a temple. It's like a time temple, um for your mind. It's not a stone temple or
Yeah.
whatever, but it has the qualities of a temple. Four beats, they're like the four pillars. The four beats in the bar, like the four pillars, the four
Yeah.
corners, and then you build up this like structure within it. Yeah.
Well, it's the whole Freemasonry thing is that they they built the wisdom and the knowledge into these larger structures like buildings, into like the art happens on like a really high level, right?
Mm.
Like if for instance, like Washington DC is like this geometric grid that's like got all this hidden meaning in it,
Mm.
which is like a whole different conversation in itself. But um,
Mm.
it's the wisdom is hidden into the art in such a way that that's what allows it to persist through the ages,
Yeah.
right? Like if this wisdom, the reason it was secret, right, and it was so held tight, is because if the truth was ever like spoken outwardly,
Mm.
it would have just been burned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they wouldn't have let it persist. Yeah, and when I say they, I'm talking about just a lot of the like really dogmatic religions and things like that.
Mm.
So they would hide it in like in the dimensions of a building,
Mm.
right? And that's like such a classic thing. In Egypt, there's temples that the temples have a certain resonance, right? Like if you go in the temple and you start to like voice, or like tone,
Mm.
there's certain frequencies that'll start to like happen, like it'll start to pick up and resonate. And that there was this woman that actually went and like measured all the angles and the sizes and proportions of these temples, and discovered that they had actually embedded like these sacred scales, like modes and scales,
Mm.
um,
Yeah, into the building. Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
temple,
Yeah.
into the building itself. And so
Wow.
this woman then figured out, like decoded the scales, and then she's a harpist, and then she basically made set those scales on her harp and then like played the music, and it was just like beautiful, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So
Huh.
that's very interesting,
That's
right?
really
So it's just
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the kind of like level of thinking of how do we put embed meaning into the things that we create. And
Mm.
musically speaking, there's more, there's so many possibilities there. right?
Mm.
And 432 hertz, and not necessarily 432, but just in the frequencies that we use and the way the numbers are, we can actually embed imagery, geometry into our music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
by the scales that you pick and the proportions and all these things, there's so much that can be done there.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, when you
anyways,
start working with the 432 and using those harmonic numbers, then yeah, that's what I'm saying. These kind of resonant expressions are built into the music, even if you don't know that it's happening. If everything's tuned that way, then yeah, you're just that's happening. It's like they say the temples are being built in your music, as it were. Um, but yeah, it's a different kind of structure. But yeah,
right.
I just want to say, like, yeah, just looking at that pelican thing again. I mean, does the letters mean anything to anybody? Like INRI?
Yeah, so
it's-
I have the
I'm thinking, to me it means inner eye. Yeah, inner
yeah.
eye, which we were talking about, and I'm seeing here like the yeah, the cross. The cross is this vein that I was telling you about. I can't remember. Is it the medulla oblongata? Is that what it's called? My anatomy is a bit rusty, but this point where the two veins intersect into the one vein going up, and the oils are combined into the Christos, awakening the pineal gland, which is represented by the rose in the Western tradition, or the lotus flower in the Eastern tradition. But basically, this multi-petaled thing. And then we have the crown on top. The crown chakra is on the top there, and then this compass like coming down to the ground, and the compass of, I guess, is symbolic of the mind and the intellect. It's a tool for measuring and creating, isn't it? In a way, in a musical sense, a compass is like our sense of timing or something.
Yeah, so and then the INRI thing too, there's a few different it's one of those things that, like, it means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a little research and found that the alchemists saw that the meaning behind the letters INRI is that it's actually uh, a Latin phrase. It's Igne Natura Renovatur Integra, which basically translates to, by fire, nature is restored in purity.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because the whole premise of alchemy is that it's all pure. Fire is the engine of alchemy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like everything is about heat and fire, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
physical fire or it's you look at this, the apparatus there on the right.
Mm-hmm.
What's making the whole thing happen is this fire that's just this steady, constant flame, and it's the purification, the refinement is happening because of that flame.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that I noticed over here on the left with the pelican is that if you kind of like squint your eyes a little bit, the babies actually start to look like fire. Yeah. Because we know that the distillation apparatus needs fire to make it go. So you could say that, there is a sort of fire aspect going on there,
Mm-hmm.
and that the fire is actually causing the distillation happen, and then it's feeding back. There's that feed, like the fire feeds the fire type of a thing. It's kind of like the eternal fire or whatever. Um,
Epic.
so
So next, shall I move on?
yeah, the next one's a good one.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. If you compare the two pieces of art, there's almost the same thing going on, except that to me, the one on the left is the process of exalting, and the one on the right is the product that's exalted.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow.
So really, this one on the right is actually more corresponding to the Philosopher's Stone, which is coagulation. Okay, which is what we're going to talk about next week.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see how it's basically the same thing. It's the nest is on fire. It's you kind of see what's going on there. And now, interestingly enough, the pelican is like the energy of it is very kind of like downward and cyclical almost. Like it's the beak is down. It's it's kind of like got its head down. It's doing something. But then when you get to the Phoenix one, it's like that cycle, like that process is complete and it kind of like blossoms out, right? And you could kind of see like that rose. You could say that the rose and the Phoenix are probably one and the same.
Yeah. It's well, yeah. So I in the painting I have up on the wall here, this one that I put earlier, there is in the symbol of the distillation phase is a dragon, or maybe it's a phoenix. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, but a bird like creature like this, which is in a bed of fire, and which is actually eating its own tail. Yeah, but I want to.
I'm gonna grab something real quick. Keep going.
Yeah, I'll just address like I think Alina was saying there. She felt that it looked some of this looked quite religious, and certainly we've noticed. I mean, neither of us were really are religious, but we've the alchemy has led us into a lot of this. But the way I think about it though is that it's really just about processes. Yeah, it's not the word religious is like I don't know, it's such a heated word, but I feel like all this stuff is just teaching us about processes, yeah, like actual like physical processes, about how energy transforms, and I feel like I actually believe that a lot of ancient scripture is just telling us that as well, and so here like the cross with the rose, and the Christ and the cross, it isn't talking about a man nailed to a piece of wood. It's talking about the oil, the Christos, rising up through the veins and awakening the pineal, which, if you've had a divine moment of truth or a DMT type experience, you'll know it's like, I mean, it's the classic mystical experience, experience of God or whatever. But, just taking DMT is not going to really cut it. You have to actually do the physical work to raise the vibrations within you and do the alchemy within you to raise it up into your mind. So yes, there is a lot of overlap with Christianity and Buddhism and all these things like coming up as we dive into the alchemy more, but it's not dogmatic religion. It's like this is about like processes of energy transformation, like these are people like us who were working with music and chemicals and like plants and just like actually seeing what works. They weren't interested in like far out theories and airy fairy like faith in this and all that. It was like they were interested in things that were real, things they could do. Do you know what I mean? And I think in modern times we have this idea that like in the olden days all the magicians and alchemists and all that it was just a bunch of oldie timer like hokey pokey, religious mumbo jumbo, pseudoscience, primitive bullshit. But in fact, like the opposite is true. Like these people, they had no time for things that didn't work. You know what I mean? Like, but people practicing magic, like they weren't. It was like they knew what they were doing because they were testing it, and it either worked or it didn't. And the stuff that worked, they wrote books on it, they made paintings about it, and they made sure that knowledge would last long into the future, even in spite of governments and churches and religion, people who would just want to destroy the knowledge. They made it last because they made it so obscure that the eyes of ignorance couldn't even see it. They don't even know it's there. They just look at it and they're like, oh, that's fucking weird, and they don't even think any more about it. And so that's the same with the tarot cards and this kind of thing as well. It's like
it's interesting too that like Christianity is such an interesting phenomenon, right? And what we see today is like the sort of modern expression of Christianity, and like for most of us there's like a bad taste in our mouth about it, but that's just the result of a lot of people basically taking these like these esoteric things at face value, right? And that's Christianity is like Christianity, like the Bible in itself is an alchemical text, but not if you take it at face value. But there's some really interesting stuff, and that's why you see a lot of like this whole Rosicrucian thing here on the left. I guess I think they say like that Rosicrucianism is like mystic Christianity or something like that. But anyways, the whole point is that like if we look into things rather than just at them, then we'll start to actually see the truth.
Yeah. Awesome.
And all the religions, they all are saying the same thing. They're all pointing at the same thing. They just have their, it's like we have a rose here, and then like Hinduism has a lotus, and it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, the 7 little birds, the 7 luminaries, the 7 planets, this 7. It's a deep subject, but I think I think we've gone on quite a bit on the alchemy side of things today. So I was going to move it into the musical side of it. As I say, I was going to keep that a bit shorter this time, but I'm open to taking any questions any of you might have as well on mixing. As I say, because actually like doing a mix down in a webinar is not really a thing, but I will show you how I'm going to approach it and how I like to approach my mix downs. You might be wondering like what does mixing have to do with distillation, or maybe it's really clear to you. It's kind of a strange work because mixing in a way like it's like taking at face value, the word mixing is almost like the opposite of distillation. Yeah, because with distillation you're like purifying, you're getting this like singular,
it's like you're extracting.
Yeah, but mixing is like, so you think of like chucking lots of things in the mix, but actually it's just, I guess, called mixing because of the way it's traditionally done with faders and stuff. But what you are ultimately doing is you're unifying all the elements of the music into a single expression, a single waveform, a single vibration, a single file, so it's the final sort of unification of like all the work that you've done, and this idea of like agitating and sublimating it, turning levels up, turning them down, turning them up, turning down, turning the treble up on the drums, turning it down, just like agitating, sublimating, just like finding the sweet spot and all the different sounds and finding how the best way for them to relate to each other and ultimately to get the correct overall like tonal balance. This just reiterates what I just said, but basically the goal of the mixing stage is to blend all the sonic elements together into a singular voice, and with care and ingenuity remove any conflicting frequencies. That's an important one. Sometimes things conflict in the mix. It's a good opportunity to make sure nothing is conflicting and give the fullest possible expression to the most subtle and nuanced aspects of the track. Okay, so by now you'll have a really good sense of the identity of the track. And Carlos saying take out the vocals. So and then so I'll say adjusting the levels and the tonal balance of the sounds in order to agitate and sublimate them and find the sweet spot. And then ultimately you're going to render out a harmonically balanced mix down ready for completion. Okay, so I put mix down in quotes there because the reason it's called a mix down is, again, that's just from old sort of studio days, because they had all these tracks and they had to like put them down to one track, so it could be played on commercial music systems and whatnot.
I love this. I love that word that we were playing with there on that last slide of the exaltation. Yeah, and that was one of the words for distillation, or one of the correspondences, and that I can really see how like for me the process of mixing is a process of exaltation, and it's like taking what we've got and then like finding the bits that we want to speak louder and be more potent and exalting those by like maybe boosting it or whatever, and then the things that are kind of excess or not as desirable, we kind of put those down, pack them in a little bit, so that it's exalting is like that drawing out the potency and the essence of like what we want to really have be the leading thing.
Alrighty, so that was a long presentation today. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope it was useful. I wanted you to feel. I wanted you to feel the alchemy side of it and the depth of what we're dealing with here and the power of it as much as possible. Because as I dive deeper into doing this with you, that's what I'm feeling. It's really starting to appreciate the depth and the power of what I'm playing with, and the music is just a part of it. As I said right at the beginning, don't be like the puffers. Just don't do it for the money and the fame or whatever. It's a practice. It's like a daily. It's like kung fu or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like a daily practice. You do it for the distillation of your own soul, as it were, for your own happiness and your own joy. And if you can make a business out of it, great. But there's a lot more work involved to make a business of it. But even if you can't make a business of it, you should still practice music every day, even if it's only singing in the shower or tapping drum beats out on your lap or something. But keep that music flowing through you. Okay, so we will get into Ableton in a second.
And then, so as we're going through this, if you guys have questions, just type in the chat, and then I'll keep a tally, and we'll just I guess it's just because of the nature of this specific presentation, we could probably kind of be answering questions as we go along.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I say, I have some plans for what I'm gonna say or whatever, but
Okay.
I'm probably not gonna do a lot of mixing, as it were. And actually, this has come out really sweet. You got it there, yeah.
Yeah. I don't hear anything.
Oh, I'm not.
I see
I'm not playing yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. We're good.
Okay. So let me just talk you through. I hadn't had a lot of time on it this week, so I've still got a bit of fermenting to do really before I mix it down and wrap this up. But I made some changes to the keys. So talking about like subtlety and making things a bit more subtle, I wanted to just make the keys a bit more subtle instead of just being like blatantly electric pianos. Let's see, for example, I'll just show you what I did here. I'll take this bit of audio out here and just put it back to the start. So I recorded some chords, which I came up with the two chords I came up with in the last session. And so that was the recording. I basically took them and I kind of started to play a bit later. So like just cut out this whole like first part of the note because it's got that kind of tiny electric piano ring to it, and started it a bit later. I then copied it across to another track and reversed it as well. So each chord is played followed by itself in reverse at the same time. And then I've used this LA3A, which is like my absolute go-to mixing tool. This is a UAD version, but there's lots of different emulations of the LA2A compressor. It just basically lets you reduce the peaks and turn up the gain. It's like really simple, but it's a good way of leveling out waveforms that might be a little bit overly dynamic, if you want to make them kind of smoother. And so, I just kind of leveled out these waveforms with that. Added a bunch of reverb, a lot of reverb, like 14 seconds of it, and then did something similar with the reverse part as well. I added a bunch of reverb and a phaser, which has some frequency automation and stuff. And I just made this intro. I extended the intro out and tweaked some other bits and stuff. I still feel like I have to do more work on this later section. And anyway, I'll play it for you and you can hear it. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of where it's at. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I still feel like I got still some like editing and stuff to do, but yeah, like this, this section here, where I wanted it to get like really kind of like trippy and sort of yeah, kind of a bit hectic, but that I still need to edit that down a bit. There's definitely going to be some like clashing and stuff in there, and yeah, just smoothing out that kind of outro and some of these transitions and things, but yeah, not too much more, I think. But yeah, we'll see. So I mean, again, this has been a novel process of doing this with you guys, and I'm determined to obviously, yeah, finish it and submit it for our compilation, for the Audio Alchemy compilation, which we're going to be doing. Which the submissions are December 1st, so I still got a little bit of time. But yeah, let's talk about then the mixing process. So going from here, so assuming you've got your track kind of done and you're happy with it, now you just want to take it that bit further and get it sounding sweet. So the way I tend to start with this, a very simple way to approach it would just be to mix the groups. Now, assuming that you've got your groups kind of sounding pretty good, you may want to go in and individually adjust the levels within the groups. You might find that like maybe there's a hi-hat that you started with way back at the beginning of the project, which is actually like inaudible or something like that. This happens quite a lot with people's mixes, that they get too many tracks together and they find there's these things that they started with that they'd kind of turned down and and kind of almost just like pushed them out of the mix because they've been hearing them so much, and added all this new stuff after them. But I've kept this quite simple, by necessity and by intent. So I haven't got too many like crazy layers, and I haven't been pulling in lots of samples and stuff like that either. Most things are all just of my own creation here, I think. So yeah, so what are you looking for in a good mix? Well, actually, no. Let me start by just saying, so yeah, you can mix each of the groups separately. So I've got basically those groups there. They've all got their own levels. Actually, if I close them down, yeah, I can see it all much clearer here. We can expand the mixer view if you want to start playing with the faders and things. Okay, so from here we get a good sense of like what the actual value is of the thing, and if we open them up a bit more, we'll actually get the numbers. So like every mastering engineer that I know always asks for at least 6 decibels of headroom. Okay, so there's your -6 there. So whatever's going to be the loudest sound in the track, which if you're making music that's anything like what I'm doing, I would recommend it's the kick and the snare. Are really your 2 pillars that you're going to be like the 2 pillars of Freemasonry or whatever. Like they're like the 2 pillars, so they're going to be the 2 loudest things in the track. So I'm looking here now to the drums and the kick and the snare. Because you can see both the kick and the snare are kind of like leveling out at about -6 or just under there, because I've already thought ahead and done it, which it definitely isn't always the case, but I guess I've just been a bit more, every time you go around the 7 steps, every time you go through the process of creation, you do it better the next time, that's the thing. So I've got things that the mix is actually sounding pretty sweet to me now. I've been kind of doing it as I go and applying what I know. But anyway, so I'm not going to go and mix these different elements. They all sound like they're loud enough. I've got a compressor on there. I might do some EQing on the drums, actually. The way I approach this is to then just take all the levels down and bring them up one by one from the bottom up and see how they sound together. So let's see. So these are all the group levels are at 0. So that's nice and easy. So I'll just select all and then take them down. Okay, so now if I bring the bass up first. Okay, so I'm noticing that in the percussion group here, there's quite a wide sort of dynamic range, which is this kind of like dark green that you're seeing here. The dark green is the difference between the peak level and the average level. So you can see some of the percussion is actually peaking up quite high because there's lots of like random noises in there from the percussion instrument and stuff. So I'm going to go to the percussion group, and I'll use the this little plugin that I love so much. Where is it? The LA3A. I'm going to put it after the calcinator, which is the effect rack that I had on the percussion, because I think some of these effects are just turning the levels up quite high. This LFO tool is really just simulating a sidechain effect there. So it's just a rhythmic envelope that's just dipping the percussion volume, just making it flow with the kick and the snare more. So yeah, so with this then, what you do is just put it on the track and you turn up the peak reduction until you start to see it reducing, it'll show you how much it's reducing the gain. And then, so really for this, I just want to be catching like the loudest bits of percussion that are kind of, just a bit too loud, and then bringing them back to the level of the rest of the percussion. Okay, so yeah, it's subtle, subtle stuff. It's not as spectacular and exciting as the dissolution phase or whatever. Playing with all the knobs and stuff. But this is the reality of it. It's just we're just sweetening things ever so slightly, just correcting any errors or identifying like any conflicting frequencies or anything that can be just made a bit smoother, a bit better. So in the bass department, I've got a bunch of things that I'm not using. Let's see, I'll just delete those. And the bass is running pretty smooth. I've got 3 basses that I'm actually no longer using. I'm probably not going to use these in the track at all. So I could save myself a whole heap of processing power by just deleting those. And yeah, I've got my pluck bass, and that's already, I've already done a fair bit of EQing on that, just to kind of get it sounding good. If I turn all that off. Okay, so you see the Pultec's really making the most difference because it's got this kind of bass boost going on at the 60 hertz and whatnot. But yeah, with the bass boosting, I would say like keep in mind that it's not just about how heavy your bass is; it's about the interplay between the bass and the other elements. It's that kind of dynamic, and your bass doesn't necessarily always need to be boosted. Sometimes it might need to be cut. It just depends on what your kick drum is doing, and your snare drum, and how much space you have, and how much other elements you have in the mix. That's why there's no sort of hard and fast rule, as it were. But what I'll show you is how you can get the overall balance of your track sounding pretty good. So I'm just going to turn those back up to 0 because you get the idea. So it's just like taking everything down and just building it up slowly and bringing bits back in, brightening them, dulling them, just testing how they relate to each other. Now, I want to just talk a bit about analysis because I've got this really great analyzer tool. Let's see. So first of all, before I put it through an analyzer, I'm gonna just run it through a limiter just to get the level up. So I'm gonna put the invisible limiter on here, and I'm gonna just go to my VSTs because the AU doesn't work for some reason. And then I'm gonna grab this sample grabber, which is just like a little tool for sending the output to the analyzer, which is in a separate program. Is everyone still with me? Jolly good. So yeah, so I've got this analyzer called Flux Pure, really nice analyzer system. And so now if I just go back and I'll use the limiter to basically turn up the master volume so that it's just maybe just a tiny bit of limiting, just enough to get it up to that 0 dB level. You see at the moment it's kind of averaging about around about -6. Okay, so now I've got it like hitting 0. And the sample grabber is sending the audio information to the analysis tool. So let's just, I'll let it play and we can have a look at the analysis in all its glory, and then I'll explain how we can use it to make better mixes. Okay, so what you're seeing here then is the frequency spectrum, of course, from 20 to 20 kilohertz, displayed in nice rainbow colors. Over here, it's just showing it kind of sideways, kind of scrolling view, which can be, you can start to get some pretty interesting things in there when you're doing work with melodies and stuff, and you can see the gaps and how it's like jumping up between all the different frequencies. And then over here, it shows the spectrum, but split into left and right channels, and that gives this nice kind of sense of, you know, the frequency like going up and down, and then stereo going left and right. You know, like the alchemical images. You know, it gives you this kind of Christmas tree effect of looking at your music, a way of looking at your music. Now, what makes a good mix? You know, this is a question that's you know, wondered about for a long time, and you know, I've made some terrible mixes in my time. You know, just feeling it out and trying things, and you know, moving to different rooms and different speakers and stuff like that. You know, sometimes you just get it way wrong. But now I think I've finally got a way, and you know, I've been using this analyzer for a couple of years, and it's really kind of getting to grips with what constitutes a balanced mix. Now, I'm going to show you what we can do is we can take a track that we like the sound of, and then we can look at its average spectrum to see just what kind of shape it is within the frequency domain. And then we can look at the shape of our music and see and compare them, you know, and that helps us give us like just a visual representation that allows us to see past maybe any problems with the room or the speakers or whatever. So, so I need a track to use as a reference track. What should we use? Maybe something from Tipper, because everyone seems to agree that Tipper's music sounds pretty good.
Hey, I was gonna say too, you know, you could probably just choose anything that sounds really good, but specifically, like if you know, if you were like writing a side-dub tune, go grab like an op track or something, right?
Yeah.
So it probably best if you've got like a certain sound you're after, grab, you know, a piece of music that is exemplary in that domain specifically.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. But also I think just we're I think for creative referencing, but also I think just in general, like anything you like the sound of, you know, it can work, you know, that you're trying to look at. But for sure, if it's in the style that you're making, then yeah, that definitely makes more sense. I don't know. I'm just gonna get something by Tipper because everyone seems to agree that his music sounds pretty good. All right, Flares at Dawn. Right, that's one of my favorite Tipper tracks. I'll just drop it in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this solo it, and I'll just play like the one of the busy sections of the track where, you know, you want to get one of the full on sections where there's the most amount of frequencies going through it. And then I'm going to look at it in the analyzer here and turn on this button here, which we turn on this button here, which will then hold it and average, show us the average over time. Okay, so let's okay. So first with the tipper track. Wow, that's loud. Holy shit! Turn it down. I've got the limiter on there as well. I just turn that limiter down, or turn it off. Yeah. I just turn my headphones down a bit. So it doesn't really matter how loud it is, because it's the frequency shape of it that we're after. Okay, so that just that little section, we played. It's kind of like, yeah. Rich is saying my rule of production: never compare your tunes to tippers. Yeah, but so I just want to just look at this now. So we can see this like minus 24 dB sort of line is about the maximum line that things are being referenced toward at the moment, and we can see that on average, like the bass, like down in like the 60, 50, 60 kilohertz there at the sub, that's yeah, on average actually even a little bit lower than some of the mid-range stuff that's happening there. So and that tune is not a tune that isn't bassy. I mean, it definitely, I've heard it played on a system, and it's like, the bass is there. But what I'm seeing here is that the mid-range stays up at the same volume as the bass, like almost all the way up to like 500. Even a kilohertz is like almost touching the same level as the sub bass at 1 kilohertz. So this kind of like forward mid-range, as you might call it, like when the frequencies in the mid-range are really forward in the mix. Like I found that that's something that I've been striving for, but in producing in rooms that aren't quite treated, I find myself pushing the mid-range back, like unconsciously, and turning the bass up. And this is a common problem. People will turn up the bass and turn up the highs and push back the mids. But what you really want, I think, in the mix when it comes out, is you want those mids to be really clear, because this is all your melodic detail and voice detail and stuff. So anyway, so that's what the tipper one looks like. Let me just take a screenshot of it so that whoa, what happened there? Take a screenshot. All right, so I've got a screenshot of that, and then turn it off. So now let's mute that and go back to my mix, and I'll go to one of the bits. I'll go to this trip out bit where like I've got lots of different or I'll start from this drop here, or maybe a little bit before the drop. All right, let's do this. All right. So yeah, not bad. Pretty similar sort of profile as you're seeing there. So the bass, the mid-range detail, like all those little plinky plonky piano stabs and stuff, like those are all coming through around about the same level, a little bit louder in the peak than the bass. But these little variations are fine. When the track is mastered, those will be kind of leveled out, and the master engineer will kind of knock into shape. But yeah, so this is the kind of profile shape you're looking for. I mean, let me just get the tipper one up here as well. Is that it? Let me just cut it out there. Okay, so yeah, and so if you're not in an ideal listening environment, and your speakers maybe aren't all that high end or whatever, and you might be wondering about how bright is your music, or how bright is too bright, and again, this is just a good way to analyze that. We can say, all right, well, if the bass and all the kind of mid-range harmonics are poking out at -24, and the high frequency, like 18 20 kilohertz, is poking out about -36, and then so I'll look at the tipper one as well, and I see the same thing here. I actually just cut it off, but you see like more or less the same thing. The high. Well, actually, no. So over here, his high frequencies are actually rolling off. Now that could be a mastering. That could be a mastering decision that made that. They just kind of rolled off those high frequencies there. And it actually goes right down there. So you can see it's been cut, like literally cut at 20 kilohertz. But of course, my track, because it's not a finished master or whatever, it still extends over into the 20 past 20 k.
Hey Steve.
Yeah.
Is that tipper tune a wave or a FLAC?
A wave, yeah, or maybe a FLAC, yeah. No, it's
All
an
right,
MP3.
it's not MP3.
It's an MP3.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
yeah,
that shouldn't matter too much. But hi, what?
well, sometimes the MP3 can roll off the highs a little bit.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. I didn't even realize it was an MP3, but yeah, MP3s will roll off all that extra information that's inaudible. So that's kind of, that's how I've been approaching it now. And the mixes have been coming out really solid. They've been translating to the dance floor pretty well, and it's been easy to master them just for for playing out. Since I kind of adopted this approach. But before I did this, there was still a lot of guesswork in my mixes. I mean, I did use analyzers, obviously, but I didn't really, I wasn't sure what the ideal shape of the mix was. I was finding that actually my mids were really low a lot of the time. I would have this kind of lump in the low end. Then when I get to about 200 hertz, that middle section would actually be like really scooped out a lot. That was something that was doing a lot in my older music, is the mids. But then it can be corrected in mastering. That's the thing. But ultimately, you want to mix like there's no mastering, right? You want to just get everything as good as it can be.
And one thing I like a tip I picked up many years ago that I've kind of it's been a ongoing practice is to cut out unnecessary frequencies, like always. And like what I mean by that is usually like on every track, what I'll do is just drop like an EQ. Mm-hmm. And then if it's like let's say like a lead or something like that, I'll just roll off the bass no matter what. And usually even in the mixing stage, what I'll do is for every element, go through and then like you know, if it's like a mid or upper range sound or instrument, I'll then like use the high pass, like kind of a high pass cutoff sort of effect with the EQ, and then like turn it up, the frequency up till you can start hearing it affecting it, and then back off until you can't notice that it's affecting it, so that it's basically so that every layer is like being cut. And over time, if you have like 10 instruments and they might not be having a whole lot of activity like in those upper or lower registers, you can start to like get little bits of dirt. So it's just like a good housekeeping method.
Yeah.
Just to clean up and give everything its own space.
That's it. Cleaning as you go as well. I'm getting better at cleaning as I go, which is how I'm, obviously getting a bit better results, with a lesser amount of effort. But yeah, cleaning as you go. But then, yeah, I find like when I start using samples, and like it's often in samples where you find the most amount of hidden dirt, But if you're using, synths and you're keeping on track of things, usually the synths are coming out all right. But yeah, it just depends. You can find like really surprising, like menacing, like rogue frequencies. Just they just show up all kinds of places. It just unexpectedly. Um, but yeah, so I mean that's all I was going to say about mixing today. As I hope that that's been useful. I have to say this is really the goal. The goal of the mix is to get all your tracks balanced in a way that looks something like this. It's been said that the ideal frequency profile for the human ear is the profile of pink noise, and you may have seen that. Let me just bring it up. Pink noise spectrum. Probably just put a pink noise sample through it, but yeah, it's essentially something like this. I think we do it a bit differently in music. That's obviously very linear, but yeah, pink noise you can use as a reference for like a harmonic distribution. Cool. All right. Well, I'll drop the screen sharing.
Sweet. So yeah, we have a couple questions. So one question was, Alina was asking, do you have a recommendation of a replacement compressor for that U80 compressor you used? If there's anything specifically that you would.
Yeah, yeah, you were asking this last week about something as well, and I think I had the same answer for you, which is that there's another one in the Waves bundle. It's called I think it's called the CLA2A.
Sweet.
CLA2A or something. Yeah, it's another. But yeah, there are various other ones. If you look it up, the original compressor, the hardware compressor, was called the LA2A, I think, and there's lots of different emulations of it. It's just the two knobs, just peak reduction and gain. I don't know why. It's like the simplest. I didn't get it at first. I was like, this is the most boring plugin ever. But then when you actually then start tackling a mix down, and you realize that a lot of the time the reason you can't mix things is because the waves are so all over the place. They're really dynamic, and then that just has a way of just bringing the waves into these like much smoother, yeah, easier to fit in the mix with other things.
Yeah. So I think that was the only question that wasn't already answered during the thing. Michael Patrick is asking, did you guys talk about the Fletcher-Munson curve? I don't even know what the Fletcher-Munson curve is.
Fletcher-Munson curve. Oh man, that's digging deep into my memories. I did learn about it some years ago, but I have totally forgotten what it is. Oh, the equal loudness contours. Yeah. I guess, yeah. I mean, I can mention it. It wasn't part of the thing, but yeah. This is the way our ear responds to frequencies, right? And where we see, for example, the highest amount of sensitivity of the ear is in the sort of 2 to 4K range, I think, which is where the sound of children screaming or dogs barking. Yeah, understandably, we're very sensitive in that department, but yeah, I'm all too familiar with that frequency band. You were saying to mix minus 6 dB on channels. What about for the master? Yeah, so that's what I mean, Andrew. Sorry, master really should be no more than -6. But your channels maybe need to be a little bit less than that just to get it to all balance out. But yeah, your mastering engineer will usually ask you for at least 6 decibels of headroom. So that's just what that means. Cool. Yeah, so yeah, we went on a bit there. We started late, and we went on for 2 hours instead of the hour and a half recommended length of the session. But yeah, as you can see, there's a lot, there's a lot to say and about the alchemy, and I wanted to say as well that yeah, we got some feedback the other day. Someone hit us up and said they loved how we were approaching this holistically and not from a tips and tricks perspective. And yeah, that's it for me now. Really, for me, like tips and tricks are just what happens when when I focus on music. I mean, they just come from my own inquisitiveness and my own experimentation, and I would say that they will do that for you. I don't watch tips and tricks videos anymore. I used to, but I don't watch YouTube videos of people producing and anymore. I literally just the time is better spent doing it myself. Do you know what I mean? And but I did watch lots of stuff in the beginning. And yeah, I just I'm coming at it from this this higher level perspective, because I feel that within this framework we can explore, like calibration or calcination, like just within that one idea of calibration, like you have all of sound design, all of it doesn't matter what DAW it is, it doesn't matter what synth it is, it doesn't matter if it's a real instrument or an electronic instrument. Calibration is completely general, and then dissolution, flowing, getting into a flow. It could be with words, it could be with music, it could be with painting, it could be with anything, so these steps are like, yeah, there's all kinds of tips and tricks you can learn that will fall into those categories. And I prefer to talk about this stuff. I prefer to talk about the high level stuff and demo the music and stuff than actually just sit and have you watch me fiddling around in Ableton for hours on end trying to find like tips and tricks, because tips and tricks will just happen. They'll happen every day. You'll find something, you'll discover a new way of turning a knob or some new, yeah, it's not all about tips and tricks. Tips and tricks does not a good musician make. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about how you approach it. That's the important thing, and that's why you'll never, be able to sort of synthesize that philosophical gold through chemistry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just approaching chemistry as chemistry. There's lots of tips and tricks in chemistry and lots of different things you can do within that realm, and it's almost it's infinitely vast, but it's never going to reach the fullest potential of what it can be because it's not alchemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's missing that component. So I think the same thing is sort of true with music, is that like really when we want tips and tricks, it's like we want tips and tricks because we just want to make better music, right? Like that's why we want tips and tricks, but the tips and tricks aren't making the better music. It's how we approach it, how we look at it. It's a more fundamental, foundational shift in perspective and approach that alters how we, alters the result. It's like that butterfly effect. Now, but if you know both, yeah, I mean, obviously tips and tricks are going to come, but again, it's like you could know all the tips and tricks, and that doesn't mean you're going to make good music. That's why, most people that, teach music they don't make that good of music. They know all the tips and tricks, but that doesn't mean they're going to make good music. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think that like, but if you practice the alchemy, if you practice the holistic approach, like the tips and tricks are going to come and they're going to be your tips and tricks. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a process of like, dissolution, right? You just like jam and just try stuff and it's it'll happen.
Yeah, I think about the cumulative effect, like when you're designing a sound, or if you if you're getting your hands dirty, you're in there, you're working with a synth. Like think of like the cumulative effect of all the decisions you made, like every turn of the knob, every switch of a button, every like, and the sound you end up with is essentially a unique path of exploration that you took from the default preset to arriving at that sound. It's a unique path of exploration that you took. It's a series of choices that you made. It's a reflection of your inner state, and so yeah. So I just like this idea that really as teachers we can only show you the door. You know what I mean? We can show you like different pathways that you can take when you open a synth. You know what I mean? Different ways to approach it, but like for me to go and say that, here's how to make this sound or here's how to make that sound, to me just doesn't even see that doesn't even make sense to me. Like, it's like the sound, it's not about the sound. Like, yeah, there's so many variables. It's like it's how you move, it's how you move things, how you move the sounds, how you move the synths, the choices that you make, that's what makes the music, not, yeah. So this is just the way we're approaching music, and just kind of, hopefully it's fresh and inspiring for you all, and yeah, it's a good time to be alive. Thank you, Michael, Patrick.
Sure is.
We freaking love you too. High five. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the support. We love doing this. We absolutely love it. There's so much, there's so much. This is why we just started doing these free webinars. We're just like, you know what? It's just that alchemy is just like this fountain of knowledge. And if we don't just start like talking about it and sharing it and like getting it out there to people, like, what use is it to anybody? It's, yeah, so it's good.
Music's gonna change the world. Just watch.
Alina's has a question. Go for it. So, any more questions there? Yeah. A few people asked about the compilation just while Alina's writing her question. Yeah. So we want to get the compilation submissions in by December 1st. Ideally, I think someone was asking if they can submit it a bit later. But I'm sure there will be late submissions. There always are, but that's the deadline we're all aiming toward. So yeah, but there will be future compilations as well. We don't want this to be just one thing. We want to keep it going. Yeah. So yeah, if you don't quite feel ready or whatever, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, just so you guys know, like the release is going to happen on the winter solstice on December 21st. I believe it's 21st. So, it's going to take. It's going to take time to master everything. So obviously, if it's not in by the 1st of December, there's a couple days wiggle room, but we do need to release the thing on the 21st. And so, so yeah, more than a couple days late, it's going to be too bad. And you have to wait till next time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the solstice lasts a few days, doesn't it? So it goes, because it lasts 3 days, doesn't it? It's like strictly, but the 21st is the first day of the solstice. That whole time I'm going to be at COSM as well, so I really need to get my part in it done before then. Where do we send submissions? I don't know. I think we'll make an official submission thing, post it on the Facebook group, and you can do it through there.
Yeah, for now, what people have been doing is just, I think the easiest thing would be to just make a private track on SoundCloud and then just share the link in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
That's the easiest.
Okay, and Alina's just asking, if you listen to music, if you listen to various genres and then at some point refine it more and more, and find out you listen to labels and artists that have the same sound in common and the same feel of music, then isn't this understanding what your music is telling you and where you're heading towards? I'm
not quite sure what you're asking, but it seems like, I mean, what I'm getting at is like, yeah, if you're listening to specific type of music and labels that do that music, I mean, and that's all you're thinking about, and you're, that's what you're going to probably create,
Yeah. Someone was asking about like freebies, like effect tracks and stuff like that. I'll put together a little pack to give away at the end of the webinar series. You got to stay tuned if you want to get it.
It's the gold at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and so Yeah, I'm not sure if I understood Alina's question, but yeah, there is definitely this effect of where your music does lead you to other people who think the same way as you do and feel the same way as you do. And I think that's just because of all the imprinting, that, yeah, like Andy said, the esoteric stuff, all the parts of you and your decisions and your thoughts and feelings that you've imprinted into the music. That for most people, they're not going to even notice that shit, but for someone who thinks like you and feels like you do, they're just like, oh, brother, like they're like, they feel like their family, or they found, um their guru or whatever. It's that does happen for sure. Just one of the many mysteries of music. Cool. All right, well, should we Oh, okay. Another question. A practical question. How do you choose your reference track? Were you aware if it's in the same key or tempo, for instance? Well, not at all. I mean, because this wasn't a reference track like for creative inspiration. It was just a reference track for spectral composition. Yeah. So I'm just looking at basically how the low frequencies and the high frequencies and the mid frequencies relate to each other. I don't really care what genre it is. I'm just thinking, I like the sound of this track. Everything sounds really clear. So I'm going to look at it and see. No, it doesn't matter. Well, the key, if you choose something in the same key, then the spectrum will be,
Yeah,
the same
the
grid. But it's
yeah.
still, it's just the general shape was all that I was trying to get from it,
I'm sure you could get that. You could get surgical like that if you wanted to, but that wasn't what we were demonstrating.
Yeah, it's just the shape, like where does the loudest bass note sit in relation to the loudest piano note sit in relation to the loudest hi-hat? Do you know what I mean? Where does those sit, And so really just, yeah, that's all I was looking to get. So just the general shape.
So thanks for hanging out with us, you guys. As always, we can continue the conversation over at the Facebook group. And we'll have some really, really awesome news very soon about a new community gathering place that you guys are going to be stoked about. We're stoked about it. Anyways,
we're doing lots of work behind the scenes to grow this community, and we're very grateful for everyone who shows up and supports and gets on board, and look forward to hearing all the awesome music. I see some people are submitting stuff and posting stuff at the moment. I'm going to refrain from commenting on any of the submissions just yet. I'm going to wait until they're all in to make my comments or whatever. But if you want to post it on the Facebook group now and share it with everybody, absolutely fine. But yeah, I'll just wait and do it all as part of one process, I think. So anyway, peace. Bye-bye.